Welcome to Freya's Fairy Tales, where we believe fairy tales are both stories we enjoyed as children and something that we can achieve ourselves. Each week, we will talk to authors about their favorite fairy tales when they were kids, and their adventure to holding their very own fairy tale in their hands. At the end of each episode, we will finish off with a fairy tale or short story read as close to the original author's version as possible. I am your host, Freya Victoria. I'm an audiobook narrator that loves reading fairy tales, novels, and bringing stories to life through narration. I am also fascinated by talking to authors and learning about their why and how for creating their stories. We have included all of the links for today's author and our show in the show notes. Be sure to check out our website and sign up for our newsletter for the latest on the podcast. Today is part 2 of 2, where we are talking to Enni Amanda about her novels. After today, you will have heard about teaching herself to read, writing from an early age, taking a long break from writing while learning other arts, knowing that you always must consider learning to improve, accidentally publishing your first book, joining critique groups before being ready, going wide from the beginning, writing what you love, the marketing struggle, finding the books that you love, taking into account your personal strengths when listening to advice. My lucky star. Imagine having a celebrity doppelganger. Now, imagine a hot TV star asking you to impersonate that celebrity to save his career. Failing to make it as an actress, Aria Dunn is back in her hometown of Napier working as a location scout. No more unattainable dreams, just casual clothing and low expectations. Until she finds a Turkish TV star hiding out in the historic hotel she needs for her client. Sem or Cam is desperate for good publicity after a drunken night ends with compromising photos. With his family banking on his success, he hatches a wild plan. A fake relationship with the New Zealand woman who looks like his old co-star. He just needs to keep his hands off her since they have no future. That's what everyone's saying, and they're right. But the more time they spend together, the harder it is to stick to the script. Swept into Istanbul's glitz and glamour, Arya's forced to reevaluate her sensible life plan. Should she give her acting dream one more go? And what is she supposed to do with the Turkish heartthrob and the most unattainable dream of all? My Lucky Star is a story about rediscovering passion when your dreams have failed you. It's also a story of all that is hot and Turkish. Men, tea, kebabs. Like a Dizzy in book form, but with a lot more heat. Escape to New Zealand and Istanbul with this spicy, slow-burn rom-com. The writing is the easy part. It's all of the
Yeah.
after stuff. So for me, the writing of the first draft took like 6-ish months. And then the editing and all of that took an additional and that was 6 months of working on it. I think like 15 minutes a day for most of that. And so that was,
Yeah.
like, barely I'd get, like, maybe 200 words done most of those days, so, like, it wasn't working out at a lot. And then it was, like, 2, 3 months of just, like, editing, just straight editing after that. And
Yeah.
now I'm getting into the, "Oh, no, now I have to start marketing it."
I
So
know. It's often
and
like that's when you should be like really like gearing up and getting all your ducks in a row and like having high energy. And that's what the part of the process when you're like, oh, am I not done yet? Because I'm working so hard.
And now you're like,
Oh,
now I have to be all bubbly and personable for social media so that
I
people
know.
want to look at my book. Yeah.
And also have to remember how exactly what happened in the book and like pulling quotes and things out of it. And
Mhm.
when you like read through your own book good 15 times in the last few months, and it kind of like it's just hard to go back for me. It's sometimes like I try to do some of it now when I'm editing. I'm like, okay, this is the bit that I really, really love, and I want to use this in marketing, and I like
Mhm.
earmark it now. But what I so I think it's really like that's taken me a long time to learn, but I need to do that when I'm editing,
Mhm.
not necessarily when I'm writing, 'cause that would be disruptive, but when I'm
Right.
editing, I can find the little bits and pieces that will be really good for reels and marketing and that kind of things.
Mhm.
And I and if you don't do it, then it is painful to go back and start, like, trying to pull them out when you
Mhm.
put the book down for the 15th time. It's like nobody wants to read the same book for 15 times. Like, and then like,
Not
"Hey,
really.
time to go dive in for the 16th time to find some marketing material." No.
I did not there's a couple lines that, like, I know in my head. I'm like, "Ooh, there's that one line about, a war being fought because of her." Like, there's just, like, these little lines that have, like, stuck in my head, but I have not
Well,
yet
that's good.
pulled out. I'm kind of waiting for, like and I need to do this before the ebook comes out, but, on Goodreads, when people start, like, highlighting passages in the ebook, and you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
actually see, like, "Oh, those are the lines that other humans like."
yeah.
So I'm
That's
like,
what I've been doing,
I
like,
will use
relying on ARC
those.
readers, picking up things. That's great, and some ARC readers are lovely enough to kind of pull those out and create reels or something where you can just like, "Oh, I'll steal that," 'cause that's good.
Yeah.
Mm,
The only thing I did, I haven't asked any if I can, like, use their stuff, but I did, like, make sure to tell them, like, "Hey, I'd rather you not tag me in negative reviews." Like, and they then asked for clarification on did I consider 3 stars good or bad or whatever, and I'm like, "I think it depends on how you classify your 3-star reads. Because for me,
and
3
that's the
stars is
crazy thing,
like,
like, it's
I read it, but I, may not
uh
read it again. Where like 4 and 5 are gonna be like, I really liked it, I'll probably read it again. I mean, everybody has their own rating system that they use. So it's like, it depends on you. If 3 stars a
and some people
negative for
even modify
you.
it because it is like, it's a different 3 stars on Amazon is not the same as 3 stars on Goodreads. Like,
Mhm,
they have a different definition for 3 stars. On Amazon, it is a critical review, and it pops up as a critical review, and then on Goodreads, it's like, it means I liked it or it's good or something, like, it's not
mhm,
even negative. So, some reviewers I've noticed, they might give you 3 stars on Goodreads and 4 stars on Amazon because those
mhm.
are more aligned, but yeah, it's, I don't like telling people how to rate or what to like. I
No,
can yeah,
I don't
it's
tell them
totally
how
up to them, I don't know.
I did not tell them how to rate. I even specifically told them, like, if you like, don't with now, I've heard a bunch of authors like, "Oh, don't post a 1 or 2 star until, like, it launches a couple weeks," or, like, I'm like, "No, you post whatever review you feel comfortable posting. If you feel comfortable posting the review, just don't tag me in negative
Mm,
reviews." So I'm like,
I think
"You
it's
can
okay to
post
ask
it."
people to wait a couple of weeks with their, like, 1-star review or whatever. It's not That's not unreasonable, but it's if it's gonna come out eventually anyway, I kinda
Yeah.
see it as a long-term game, and it's
Well,
like
it
the 2
also
first
kind
2
of
weeks, like, for me, that's not like my sales will come, they will trickle through, it's
mhm,
just up to how much marketing promotion I do. That's kind of like it's this up and down thing.
mhm,
I don't sell 1,000,000 copies in that first 2 weeks anyway, so it's
right.
like that doesn't really for me, doesn't make a huge difference whether that negative review gets posted within that 2-week period or 1 week after or something. It's
Right.
like
Well,
yeah.
the thing for me is, like, it looks, so say you put if you put a book out there and you only get 5-star reviews, like, you have nothing but 5-star, it
Yeah,
looks like you are spamming, or you are having all of your friends post the reviews, or you're paying for reviews, like, it looks bad if all you have is
it's a
only
bit yeah.
5-star reviews. So, like, my thing, and this is because I've talked to so many authors at this point and watched a whole lot of authors on TikTok, is like, um, if you are going to put your book out there into the world, you have to know that, like, some people aren't going to like your book, and you have to
Mm,
kind of be okay with that. And if you're not going to be okay with that, maybe you shouldn't put your book out there into the world. So
yeah, yeah.
it's, everything is, and I tried to set, because I was gathering my ARC team and sending out my ARCs right around 2 of the biggest ARC controversy things that have happened on TikTok in recent days. And so
Oh,
I
is there
wanted
something new happening? I think I missed what
I mean, it's, I mean, it's the same stuff that happens every time, but it just so happened, like, as soon as I was starting to build my ARC team, big controversy happened. As soon as I'm sending my ARCs out, big controversy happened, and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, you have to be kidding me."
Yeah,
So
I feel
so
like the TikTok
I'm like, "I
frenzy
just
is just
want to,
cyclical at
like."
this point.
And it was mainly, like, everything that I say, I'm like, "I just wanna, like, let you guys know, like, I'm not gonna come after you, I'm not going to attack you, I'm not gonna post any videos about any reviews unless you want me to." Like, you post whatever you're comfortable posting, and there was, like, something about, authors not picking ARC readers who had previously rated books 1 or 2 stars before or whatever, so I'm like, at the end of the day, some authors are crazy, and, I wanted my team as comfortable as they could be to know that, like, they were in a safe space to leave whatever review they wanted to, and also I understood if they didn't wanna leave a negative review because they didn't want another author to not pick them because of that negative review or whatever.
No, it's a complex issue, isn't it?
That's a whole lot of I don't understand how some of these authors have the time to pick reviewers based off, like, their social media following and what reviews they've left previously and all these things. I'm like, I don't have the time to look at all these people's social media accounts to figure all this out. I
I've
take
done
the
that
stance
before. I
of
just like send it to everyone, even though they think that there's
yeah.
some sort of selection process. But I'm like, I just accepted everyone because I was didn't have time
Well, like and I did
to
the
rule
same
them
thing.
out.
I accepted every now beta readers, I'll be more selective when I'm doing that again. But as far as like the first people I did, I asked them for references and I checked in with their references. And I had one that had never done it before, so no references. Um, but for yeah, ARC readers, I'm like, why would you want to limit the quantity of people that are possibly going to love your book and tell everybody about your book? So that's kind of
But
my
at some point,
thinking
I'm
on
kind of
it.
going like, I write certain kind of books, and if you rated my last two books 1 or 2 stars, it's like, why are you even applying for this new one? Like, what?
Yeah.
I I don't fully understand the logic behind it because there's like thousands of authors and books that you could be like applying
Yeah,
for.
that would be a little bit weird. I don't
I don't know. Like
I would also question, why are you still I mean, I've left it up to I'm like, I
it's like if
understand
you
if you
hated
wanna
everything, why are you
unsubscribe.
still here?
Yeah, yeah, and I've left I let them know that at the beginning too, like, if you don't like it and you want to unsubscribe, that's totally fine.
Yeah, exactly. I tell them like you can just move on and find other books and authors to follow, and it's yeah, you don't have to stick around. There's no obligation because I gave you a free book. It's like that's fine. Let's just both move on. If you don't like it, that's totally valid, totally fine. Just read something else. Like I
Mhm,
really hope everybody finds the books that they really, really love and are
mhm.
excited about, and it's because reading it is so much more enjoyable if the book is good and if it gels with you, if you
Yes.
really feel like, "Oh, this is for me, like, this is written for me, this is so good." You want people to find those books.
Mhm,
This is where I really hope the AI will help us in the future. I don't know how, but there's gotta be better ways to find the things that you might actually enjoy.
mhm.
Like, algorithms right now are so shit, like, this we need something that really guides us to
Yes.
those, like, hidden gems, because they if there are a million books published every year or something like that,
A lot.
how am I ever gonna find like, there's gonna be something that's just perfect for me that
Mhm.
I'm never finding, and, that's why I'm like, "Why would you hang around in some ARC team if you don't like anything?" It's like, really, there's no point. Life is way too short, just move on, for
It's funny
everyone's
you
sake.
said that though. That's the same thing that I comment on people that will like negatively review podcasts or my narrating. Cause occasionally I have a fiction podcast that's like classic novel audiobooks. And people will comment on my social media posts talking about how awful I am or how boring I am or how whatever. And my comment is quite literally always, "Isn't it great that there are so many narrators in the world and you can go find one that you like?"
Yeah.
I don't add and leave me alone, but it is implied.
I know, there's something for everybody, and that's the real beauty of the situation where we are in right now, and, like, the rise of self-publishing and all that, like, we don't have the gatekeepers, we have all this content, we just need better tools to find the content, I
Mhm.
give you that, but still, like, it's out there, so there's no reason for you to hang around if you're not enjoying yourself, for any content, it's just yeah, it would be ludicrous. It's like, I can only imagine that maybe you liked something the author wrote earlier, and now you're, like, waiting book after book. It's like, maybe
Mhm.
they'll write something similar again
Maybe.
in the future.
Yeah.
There might be some of that, who knows? But there's a lot of things that I know that I don't enjoy from the first try. I can tell, "Okay, I don't enjoy this. I can just move on." It's
Mhm.
so simple. Like there's who's the really, really popular audio narrator who just the male voices in this weird way. I can't listen to it. Like I don't know if something about it doesn't work for me. Like
That
the
could
way
describe me. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm really popular, but
I'm pretty sure it's not you because it was one of those like really big names that someone recommended and said that you should really try. But I'm not really an audiobook person. Like I listen to nonfiction, but the fiction I yeah, it's just something to do with my brain, like, I feel like it's always either too slow or too fast, or I'm
mm,
like I think my pacing the way that I read and my pacing doesn't match up with listening to audio. Like, I
mm.
I would have to, like, constantly slow down or speed up, or I would want to jump back and reread something. I reread a lot of stuff because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, cool sentence, how did it go?" And I
What was that again?
so I can't do that. It's really difficult to do an audio, so you
Yes.
have to be, like, really, like, navigating it and constantly, and yeah, for me, that, like, doing the male voice where they, like, drop their voice and talk like this as a male, I it just throws me every time. I'm like, like, miss what they're saying because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, weird voice."
That is how I do it.
And
I
a lot
have
of
heard
people
though.
do, and I know they're super popular, and that's what I'm saying, like, there's nothing wrong with it, it seems to work on a large scale.
Right.
So, just because it didn't work for me and my brain, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. Like, I
Right.
can tell that it works, and I would even hire someone to do my books that way
Mhm.
if there's enough evidence that it works for a lot of people, and
Mhm.
I can't judge that based on my own personal experience
Right.
as someone who doesn't really listen to audiobooks, who struggles with taking things in that format. So
Mhm.
I would just rely on the evidence of like, okay, that works. Lots of people seem to love it. I would
Mhm.
just go for that. Like there's evidence this works. I would produce my well, right now I don't have the budget to do a lot of audio, but I would love to do that. And I wouldn't mind at all. Like I think it would be a better choice to be honest than trying to hire like audio, and especially when I need, like, very specific accents and voices,
Mhm.
it would be really, really difficult to find someone who, to do my Turkish character who's got a Turkish accent. It's like,
Mhm.
how? I don't even know where to start, like, it'd
Yeah.
be really, really hard to find the talent, so I think it's a good kind of workaround if, say, a female narrator reads both and then just drops their voice, and you know that
Mhm.
it's not supposed to be then they don't, like, magically turn into a Turkish male. So you kinda go like, "Okay, I understand they're just reading the lines," and it's kinda
Yeah.
like I think it's like a workaround for that awkward situation where you can't
Now,
find the talent who would actually sound right.
I have heard from, like, authors that, there's one I recently narrated for, and most of her books, she's had male narrators, and I think I might be her only female narrator, or there's, like, maybe one other one, but she was like, having had mostly male narrators that the male is trying to do the female voices, she's like, "I much prefer you dropping your voice for the male voices than how the males raise their
Oh god.
voice for
Oh my
the
goodness,
female.
that would be even harder. I can immediately imagine that being way harder. Yeah.
So, I'm like, I'm also, sometimes, um, some authors I talk back and forth with as I'm narrating their book and getting it ready and all these things. But me and her, it's been way more conversation back and forth than I usually have. And so she kept mentioning, like, my previous narrator, blah, 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 blah. She had like two guys that did the bulk of her audiobooks so far. And so I go and I listen, like, out of curiosity. How do they perform the audiobook versus how I know I'm going to be doing it, which is going to be not over the top, but more performance than just reading the lines. And so she kept saying, "I can't stand to listen to my audiobooks. I cringe as I listen to my audiobooks over and over and over again." She told me these things. And then she listens to mine and she's like, "I didn't cringe. It's the first time I haven't cringed, but God, my characters are really toxic." The relationship between them, and I was like, I performed the toxicness as best I could.
I'm sure I highlight certain things, and that's what I'm, worried about. One day I'll do an audiobook like, okay, that's what sounds like. It's not just the voice, but it's like those are the words I wrote. I
Yeah.
actually had somebody offered to do a little clip, like read a little clip from my last book
Mhm,
on TikTok, and she did it really well, and it was like it didn't bother me at all. I put that up on my website so you can listen to that little clip, even though I don't have any other audio, and it works for me. Like think there's a lot of performance in it, and it's a little slow. Like for me, obviously, I know how it goes, so I'm like,
mhm,
okay. But I think it works, like, that sort of pacing probably works for a lot of people who are hearing it for the first time and
mhm,
not familiar with the material. I think that's another thing with, like, the author listening to it is like,
mhm. I
well,
know what's
I think,
happening.
like, "Yeah, I know what's happening, just so you know, just let's go, let's go." I'm like, people actually need time to take it in because it's all new
Mhm.
for someone else.
Well, I've heard,
So,
um, from I do not necessarily follow this rule, but I heard from one audiobook narrator that the reason that most of them talk so slow is because, like, for elderly people, it might take them longer to process it than, like, a younger
yeah.
person, where a younger person's probably just gonna speed it up on their app
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to listen to it faster. I narrate at a normal speed of speech, so I can't imagine any, older people listening to my audio that may need a slower audio. I talk slightly slower when I'm narrating than I talk normally, but as you get to, like, action scenes,
Yeah.
I speed up how I'm talking. Um, I don't know. It's like authors and styles of writing and people liking it. There are narrators that narrate some ways and narrators that narrate other ways, and one
It's a
person
really
had
interesting challenge, isn't it? Because it's like a mix
Yes.
between acting and this sort of, um, technical performance that's just getting it right, like,
Mhm.
not messing up the words and not like, all that. Yeah, I have huge respect for people who can do it. It is really, like especially when it comes to, I think, the acting part of things, like, keeping that performance consistent for such a long time. Like, you have
Mhm.
same person that we're following and they have the certain cadence and maybe somebody one of them has these like wordy rants or talks a little like you can tell from the dialogue that some things should be a little bit faster, like people are rambling and talking fast, and you
Mhm.
kind of have to adjust to that as well. Like it's not like AI would just read it like they read.
Yeah.
And it
And it
really
all
kills those
stays
bits.
at the same pace
Yeah,
the whole
it really
time.
kills it if it's something that's like a rambly rant. It's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you can't do it like that. That's horrible." It's
Or
just
you get to
like
the end of the line and it says, "He whispered," and you gotta go back and do it again in a whispered tone.
yeah. That must be a killer.
The
Uh,
amount of times I have done like, gotten to the end of a line and been like, he's he said irritated. Oh, let me go back. Do it again.
uh, or those, like, dialogue tags that aren't really dialogue tags that you're trying to understand how someone's even, like, fighting it back or doing some
Yeah.
other thing. Like, "What's
With
that
his mouth
talking about? I don't
full.
know how that sounds."
Let's
You kind
see.
of accept it. You're reading it on
Yeah.
page and you're like, "Yeah, okay." But if someone has to perform it, like, how do you think that in a way that
Yeah, let's
oh,
see, my challenge this last week, there was 2 characters talking with their mouths full, so I had to kinda talk
oh,
like this. It's so weird. I did not have anything in my mouth, I just kinda, like, garbled my speech, but
yeah, yeah,
I've also had, like, a
okay.
character that's drunk and you have to slur your speech.
Oh.
It's I mean, no
That's the
different
hard like,
than, you did
acting
the film
drunk,
stuff.
it's really hard because it's
Yes.
like drunk people are pretending to be sober, so you are acting against that drunkenness. So it's like the
So
hardest
you're
part
a
in acting.
sober person trying to act like you're drunk, trying to act like you're sober.
Yeah, there's a challenge.
It's, everything is new every day. You gotta figure something out. So what is the best piece of advice and worst piece of advice you've ever gotten?
Wow,
Answer in whichever order you want.
I think yeah. Well, I've recently kind of realized that a lot of the advice that we get given as indie authors is based on this sort of rapid release model or
Mhm.
certain kind of approach to publishing that if you look at like Mark Dawson and self-publishing platforms like it's all valid advice, but it doesn't take into account your personal kind of you know strengths and your um the way you're wired, I think. It doesn't
Mhm.
take into account what comes naturally to you and what doesn't,
Mhm.
and how it doesn't, like, help you lean into your strengths. And I think that's often the problem, like, it's good advice, but it only works on so many people and not
Mhm.
everybody.
Right.
And there's a lot of advice like that I've heard that is like, yes, it works, and I'm not saying that it doesn't because there's evidence that it works for some people, and there are people who can just focus on their publishing and that like doing it on a rapid schedule and doing lots of advertising and pushing in that way and becoming like staying relevant on Amazon and staying on top of things. And but it's only one of the ways, and I think that's something I'm slowly starting to kind of grasp is that there's so many different paths to success
Mhm.
that you have to be wary of anyone selling that one way and saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, this is how it works. This is where you should be. This is the social media platform you should be on. This is how you should be doing it." There's so many ways you can do it. And
Mhm.
it's for me, it's way more important that I find ways that I can do my marketing so that it's not taxing me and not taking away the joy of writing and all the
Mhm.
other things that I want to focus on. And it's still successful, and it doesn't have to be as successful as it is for some people who are capable of following that rapid release or other sort of more aggressive kind of let's take over the market kind of strategies.
Mhm.
Um, it doesn't have to be. It can be long term, it can be slow growth, and I'm okay with that. I want to
Mhm.
think like 10 years ahead and just build a life that I actually enjoy living.
Mhm.
And that's way, way more important than then looking at my sales figures and like hyper focusing on what's happening this month or even this quarter.
Mhm.
I'm kind of like, am I signing up for things that I will enjoy in the long run? Am I like going um taking those steps, those little steps towards like having a sustainable career that is for me is a mix of doing cover design and then doing some writing on the side. And I love both, and I love doing design work, and I love running my own business in there. So I kind of I want to keep it all.
Mhm.
So I have to forge my own path in there. And I think the best advice I've had eh, very recently is just listening to one of the podcasts. What was it? I can't remember. Might have been might have been the Ally. The Ally podcast is really good, and they had somebody on talking about these. Um, there was a whole lot of talk about different landscapes, like are you a tundra or are you a desert or so
Okay.
it was like a whole personality test based on different landscapes. It was like I'm like I'm not sure if I'm a forest or but it was a it was so I was kinda, like, giggling about that stuff, but there was the whole idea of we are so different that
Mhm.
different approaches work for different people, and you have to find your own path, and it's the only way. That's
Mhm.
kinda that stuck with me, and I don't really care if I'm the swamplands or whatever I am in the author business, but really need to, like, just trust that um, going with my guts and kind of this is what I enjoy doing, and I don't like doing like complicated reels with graphics and things like that because that's too much
Mhm.
like work for me. I do graphic design, so I don't want to be doing that day and night for my books.
Right.
I find it way easier to just pick up my phone and do a 5-minute TikTok talking about something and post
Mhm.
it. Like I don't even do a second take. I just post.
Yeah, I'm like, I vlog, but on TikTok. Like, that's
Yeah, exactly. It's like a
yeah.
personal diary kind of thing, but it helps you connect with the community. You find
Mhm.
people who connect with what you're saying, and you can create some conversation. And you kind of it's almost like checking in with yourself. That like, oh, I'll do a little personal kind of update of like, this is what I'm thinking right now. This is what's on my mind,
Mhm.
and that's I find that's really fast and easy and comes naturally, and I know for a lot of people it doesn't come naturally, and you
Mhm.
shouldn't force yourself into it. That doesn't like again, like, against how you're wired and what's natural and what your strengths are, and I think we really need to when it comes to long-term marketing and anything like that, we need to lean on our own strengths and what feels natural and what
Mhm.
we really like, how we want to spend our time. Because it's whatever the action is, you might be able to do it once, but can you keep it up for weeks and weeks and
Mhm.
months? Like, it's yeah, you shouldn't pick up anything that you can't carry on with for a long term
Mhm.
because usually the benefits will come in the long term. So
Mhm. The thing you're able to
it's not there are
sustain.
not hardly any instant hits anyway.
Alright, well, you have a good rest of your day, and I'm gonna get some air conditioning
Mm.
and get Monday's
Oh,
episode ready. So,
enjoy.
bye.
Bye.
Annie liked detective stories and mysteries as she got older. Today we'll be reading the first chapter of A Study in Scarlet. A Study in Scarlet. Chapter 1. Mr. Sherlock Holmes. In the year 1878, I took my degree of Doctor of Medicine of the University of London and proceeded to Netley to go through the course prescribed for surgeons in the army. Having completed my studies there, I was duly attached to the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers as assistant surgeon. The regiment was stationed in India at the time, and before I could join it, the Second Afghan War had broken out. On landing at Bombay, I learned that my corps had advanced through the passes and was already deep in the enemy's country. I followed, however, with many other officers who were in the same situation as myself, and succeeded in reaching Kandahar in safety. where I found my regiment and at once entered upon my new duties. The campaign brought honors and promotion to many, but for me it had nothing but misfortune and disaster. I was removed from my brigade and attacked to the Berkshires, with whom I served at the fatal Battle of Maiwand. There I was struck on the shoulder by a Jezzel bullet, which shattered the bone and grazed the subclavian artery. I should have fallen into the hands of the murderous Ghazis, had it not been for the devotion and courage shown by Murray, my orderly who threw me across a pack horse, and succeeded in bringing me safely to the British lines. Worn with pain and weak from the prolonged hardships which I had undergone, I was removed, with a great train of wounded sufferers, to the base hospital at Peshawar. Here I rallied, and had already improved so far as to be able to walk about the wards, and even to bask a little upon the veranda, when I was struck down by enteric fever, that curse of our Indian possessions. For months my life was despaired of, and when at last I came to myself and became convalescent, I was so weak and emaciated that a medical board determined that not a day should be lost in sending me back to England. I was dispatched accordingly in the troop ship Orontes, and landed a month later on Portsmouth Jetty, with my health irretrievably ruined, but with permission from a paternal government to spend the next 9 months in attempting to improve it. I had neither kith nor kin in England, and was therefore as free as air, or as free as an income of 11 shillings and 6 pence a day will permit a man to be. Under such circumstances, I naturally gravitated to London, that great cesspool into which all the loungers and idlers of the Empire are irresistibly drained. There I stayed for some time at a private hotel in the Strand, leading a comfortless, meaningless existence, and spending such money as I had considerably more freely than I ought. So alarming did the state of my finances become that I soon realized that I must either leave the metropolis and rusticate somewhere in the country, or that I must make a complete alteration in my style of living. Choosing the latter alternative, I began by making up my mind to leave the hotel, and to take up my quarters in some less pretentious and less expensive domicile. On the very day that I had come to this conclusion, I was standing at the Criterion bar, when someone tapped me on the shoulder, and turning round, I recognized young Stamford, who had been a dresser under me at Bart's. The sight of a friendly face in the great wilderness of London is a pleasant thing indeed to a lonely man. In old days, Stamford had never been a particular crony of mine, but now I hailed him with enthusiasm, and he, in his turn, appeared to be delighted to see me. In the exuberance of my joy, I asked him to lunch with me at the Holborn, and we started off together in a hansom. "Whatever have you been doing with yourself, Watson?" he asked in undisguised wonder, as we rattled through the crowded London streets. "You're as thin as a lath and as brown as a nut." I gave him a short sketch of my adventures, and had hardly concluded it by the time that we reached our destination. "Poor devil," he said commiseratingly, after he had listened to my misfortunes. "What are you up to now?" "Looking for lodgings," I answered, "trying to solve the problem as to whether it is possible to get comfortable rooms at a reasonable price." "That's a strange thing," remarked my companion. "You are the second man today that has used that expression to me." "And who was the first?" I asked. "A fellow who's working at the chemical laboratory up at the hospital. He was bemoaning himself this morning because he could not get someone to go halves with him in some nice rooms which he had found, and which were too much for his purse." "By Jove," I cried, "if he really wants someone to share the rooms and the expense, I'm the very man for him. I should prefer having a partner to being alone." Young Stamford looked rather strangely at me over his wine-glass. "You don't know Sherlock Holmes yet," he said. "Perhaps you would not care for him as a constant companion." "Why, what is there against him?" "Oh, I didn't say there was anything against him. He's a little queer in his ideas, an enthusiast in some branches of science. As far as I know, he's a decent fellow enough." "A medical student, I suppose," said I. "No, I have no idea what he intends to go in for. I believe he's well up in anatomy, and he's a first-class chemist, but as far as I know, he's never taken out any systematic medical classes. His studies are very desultory and eccentric, But he's amassed a lot of out-of-the-way knowledge which would astonish his professors. Did you never ask him what he was going in for? I asked. No, he's not a man that is easy to draw out, though he can be communicative enough when the fancy seizes him. I should like to meet him, I said. If I'm to lodge with anyone, I should prefer a man of studious and quiet habits. I'm not strong enough yet to stand much noise or excitement. I had enough of both in Afghanistan to last me for the remainder of my natural existence. How could I meet this friend of yours? He's sure to be at the laboratory, returned my companion. He either avoids the place for weeks, or else he works there from morning to night. If you like, we shall drive round together after luncheon. Certainly, I answered, and the conversation drifted away into other channels. As we made our way to the hospital after leaving the Holborn, Stamford gave me a few more particulars about the gentleman whom I proposed to take as a fellow lodger. You mustn't blame me if you don't get on with him, he said. I know nothing more of him than I've learned from meeting him occasionally in the laboratory. You proposed this arrangement, so you must not hold me responsible. If we don't get on, it will be easy to part company, I answered. It seems to me, Stamford, I added, looking hard at my companion, that you have some reason for washing your hands of the matter. Is this fellow's temper so formidable? Or what is it? Don't be mealy-mouthed about it. It is not easy to express the inexpressible, he answered with a laugh. Holmes is a little too scientific for my tastes. It approaches to cold-bloodedness. I could imagine his giving a friend a little pinch of the latest vegetable alkaloid. Not out of malevolence, you understand, but simply out of a spirit of inquiry in order to have an accurate idea of the effects. To do him justice, I think that he would take it himself with the same readiness. He appears to have a passion for definite and exact knowledge. Very right, too. Yes, but it may be pushed to excess. When it comes to beating the subjects in the dissecting rooms with a stick, it is certainly taking rather a bizarre shape. Beating the subjects? Yes, to verify how far bruises may be produced after death. I saw him at it with my own eyes. And yet you say he's not a medical student. No, heavens knows what the objects of his studies are. But here we are, and you must form your own impressions about him. As he spoke, we turned down a narrow lane and passed through a small side door, which opened into a wing of the great hospital. It was familiar ground to me, and I needed no guiding as we ascended the bleak stone staircase and made our way down the long corridor with its vista of whitewashed wall and dun-colored doors. Near the further end, a low-arched passage branched away from it and led to the chemical laboratory. This was a lofty chamber, lined and littered with countless bottles. Broad, low tables were scattered about, which bristled with retorts, test tubes, and little Bunsen lamps, with their blue flickering flames. There was only one student in the room. He was bending over a distant table, absorbed in his work. At the sound of our steps, he glanced round and sprang to his feet with a cry of pleasure. "I've found it! I've found it!" he shouted to my companion, running towards us with a test tube in his hand. "I have found a reagent which is precipitated by hemoglobin and by nothing else." Had he discovered a gold mine, greater delight could not have shone upon his features. "Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes," said Stamford, introducing us. "How are you?" he said cordially, gripping my hand with a strength for which I should hardly have given him credit. "You've been in Afghanistan, I perceive." "How on earth did you know that?" I asked in astonishment. "Never mind," said he, chuckling to himself. "The question now is about hemoglobin. No doubt you see the significance of this discovery of mine." "It is interesting, chemically, no doubt," I answered. "But practically—" "Why, man, it is the most practical medical legal discovery for years. Don't you see that it gives us an infallible test for blood stains? Come over here now." He seized me by the coat sleeve in his eagerness and drew me over to the table at which he had been working. "Let us have some fresh blood," he said, digging a long bodkin into his finger and drawing off the resulting drop of blood in a chemical pipette. "Now I add this small quantity of blood to a liter of water. You perceive that the resulting mixture has the appearance of pure water. Their proportion of blood cannot be more than 1 in a million. I have no doubt, however, that we shall be able to obtain the characteristic reaction." As he spoke, he threw into the vessel a few white crystals. and then added some drops of a transparent fluid. In an instant, the contents assumed a dull mahogany color, and a brownish dust was precipitated to the bottom of the glassy jar. "Aha!" he cried, clapping his hands and looking as delighted as a child with a new toy. "What do you think of that?" "It seems to be a very delicate test," I remarked. "Beautiful, beautiful. The old Guacum test was very clumsy and uncertain. So was the microscopic examination for blood corpuscles. The latter is valueless if the stains are a few hours old. Now this appears to act as well whether the blood is old or new. Had this test been invented, there were hundreds of men now walking the earth who would long ago have paid the penalty of their crimes." "Indeed," I murmured. "Criminal cases are continually hinging upon that one point. A man is suspected of a crime months, perhaps after it has been committed. His linen or clothes are examined, and brownish stains discovered upon them. Are they blood stains, or mud stains, or rust stains, or fruit stains, or what are they? That is a question which has puzzled many an expert, and why? Because there was no reliable test. Now we have the Sherlock Holmes test, and there will no longer be any difficulty." His eyes fairly glittered as he spoke, and he put his hand over his heart and bowed as if to some applauding crowd conjured up by his imagination. "You are to be congratulated," I remarked, considerably surprised at his enthusiasm. "There was the case of von Bischoff at Frankfurt last year. He would certainly have been hung had this test been in existence. Then there was Mason of Bradford, and then Notorious Mueller and Lafarve of Montpellier, and Sampson of New Orleans. I could name a score of cases in which it would have been decisive." "You seem to be a walking calendar of crime," said Stamford with a laugh. "You might start a paper on those lines. Call it the police news of the past. Very interesting reading it might be made, too," remarked Sherlock Holmes, sticking a small piece of plaster over the prick on his finger. "I have to be careful," he continued, turning to me with a smile, "for I dabble with poisons a good deal." He held out his hand as he spoke, and I noticed that it was all mottled over with similar pieces of plaster, and discolored with strong acids. "We came here on business," said Stamford, sitting down on a high three-legged stool, and pushing another one in my direction with his foot. "My friend here wants to take diggings, and as you were complaining that you could get no one to go halves with you, I thought that I'd better bring you together." Sherlock Holmes seemed delighted at the idea of sharing rooms with me. "I have my eye on a suite in Baker Street," he said, "which would suit us down to the ground. You don't mind the smell of strong tobacco, I hope?" "I always smoke ships myself," I answered. "That's good enough. I generally have chemicals about and occasionally do experiments. Would that annoy you?" "By no means." "Let me see, what are my other shortcomings? I get in the dumps at times and don't open my mouth for days on end. You must not think I'm sulky when I do that. Just let me alone and I'll soon be right. What have you to confess now? It's just as well for two fellows to know the worst of one another before they begin to live together." I laughed at this cross-examination. "I keep a bullpup," I said, "and I object to rows because my nerves are shaken, and I get up at all sorts of ungodly hours, and I'm extremely lazy. I have another set of vices when I'm well, but those are the principal ones at present." "Do you include violin playing in your category of rows?" he asked anxiously. "It depends on the player," I answered. "A well-played violin is a treat for the gods. A badly played one—" "Oh, that's all right," he cried with a merry laugh. "I think we may consider the thing as settled. That is, if the rooms are agreeable to you." "When shall we see them?" "Call for me here at noon tomorrow, and we'll go together and settle everything," he answered. "All right. Noon exactly," said I, shaking his hand. We left him working among his chemicals, and we walked together towards my hotel. "By the way," I asked suddenly, stopping and turning upon Stamford, "how the deuce did he know that I had come from Afghanistan?" My companion smiled an enigmatic smile. "That's just his little peculiarity," he said. "A good many people have wanted to know how he finds things out." "Oh, a mystery, is it?" I cried, rubbing my hands. "This is very piquant. I am much obliged to you for bringing us together. The proper study of mankind is man, you know." "You must study him, then," Stamford said, as he bade me goodbye. You'll find him a naughty problem, though. I'll wager he learns more about you than you about him. Goodbye. Goodbye, I answered, and strolled on to my hotel, considerably interested in my new acquaintance. Thank you for joining Freya's Fairy Tales. Be sure to come back next week for Melinda's journey to holding her own fairy tale in her hands, and to hear one of her favorite fairy tales.